So glad everybody could join us today. So today's webinar is hosted by the Pet Industry Network, right? Pet Industry Network is a collaborative group of trusted and experienced experts helping pet businesses grow smarter across every area of their business. So that's operations, hiring, branding, marketing, finances, all of that good stuff. So whether you are a brand, retailer, service provider, e-commerce business, manufacturer, our goal is to connect you with the people and strategies that actually move the needle and help your business. So if you're not already familiar with the Pet Industry Network, definitely check us out. We will drop a link in the chat. Before we dive in, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our guest today. Cait Mellor is the go-to pet industry copywriter, helping pet brands connect with, nurture, and convert their ideal customer through the power of strategic messaging. So with an extensive marketing background and over 13 years of pet industry experience, as well as formal training in copywriting, Cait can help you make your pet brand's messaging count while also keeping it conversational and interesting. When she's not busy demonstrating her knack for words, she can be found enjoying life with her husband, 2 kids, and of course, 3 dogs in South Jersey. Welcome, Cait. Guys, could you light up the chat room with a few emojis welcoming Cait here today? I would love to see just a little bit of action in the chat there as we warm up getting Cait onto the stage here.
Fantastic. Love to see that. And we would love to take a pulse in the room, quick temperature check as we dive into today's discussion. On a scale of 1 to 5, if you can drop it in the chat, scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you in your current brand messaging, right? Where are you at today between 1 and 5? So that could look like 1, your brand messaging needs a full on reset. Maybe in the middle, 3, your brand messaging gets it right some of the time and in some of the places. Or 5, your brand messaging is strong and consistent throughout all of your online presence and channels. So let's take a quick temperature check in the room here and see what do we have happening in the chat the most. We see a lot of
Lots of
threes.
3s and 4s.
Yeah. So you're in the right room because even if you are yeah, on the higher end, right, there's always another level, right? So we're here to help push through that because especially going into 2026, you're going to hear about how even more imperative it is that you do it more than ever. All right. So moving on to let's see in the room what is the biggest challenge with messaging that you're facing right now. So we have 3 options up here for you in terms of which one resonates the most with you. If you can put in the chat a 1, a 2, or a 3. So in terms of challenges, 1 stands for standing out from competitors, 2, communicating value without discounting, or 3, knowing which emotional or logical levers to lean on, right? So let's see in the room which challenge sticks out the most to everyone who's here. And right now we're seeing a mix of different numbers. Go ahead, drop it in real quick in the chat so we can see where everybody is at. What's your biggest challenge? Again, the number 3 itself is very popular. So it seems like a lot of people are saying knowing which emotional or logical levers to lean on. And even Adina, that's okay. Kind of all 3. It's too hard to manage it all. We hear you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Finally, if you could finish this sentence, our ideal customer wants to feel what? What is the emotion that you want your brand messaging to drive? Right? If you can fill in the blank to finish the
Take a
sentence.
second. Take a second to think on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Take a second there. What is the emotion that you want your customers to associate your brand messaging with? And you can copy someone in the chat. Don't be afraid to steal an idea, an emotion. So we've got nurtured, trust, confident, joy, peace of mind, trust, pampered,
Understood and heard.
understood, heard, pet loved. I love that, Adina. Like they're doing their absolute best by their pets, still getting great value and a lot of education that they walk out not only with information and facts, but they feel good about it, right? And don't worry about being wordy because you are in great company with Cait, our copywriter, in terms of how to take that wordiness and translate it into messaging that resonates, right? That's going to help you speak pet parent in 2026. Yeah. And Cait even herself has said, these are all great. Wonderful. All right. Moving on.
So a lot of you guys know maybe where your brand messaging stands at the moment, as well as what needs to change. So we're going to jump into this in just a moment here so Cait can help you tackle some of those challenges today. Keep those answers to those questions in mind as we dive in. So we're going to kick off today's discussion. As we go through it, please drop any questions that come up for you into the chat. If you can label them with a Q so that we can take note of it, we're definitely going to leave some time at the end to answer them. But I am excited to get things going. Cait, I think our first question for you is kind of like what do we do if we feel like our copy is, you know, speaking to emotional drivers or emotions in general, or if it's just listing features?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so happy to be here. And all those answers were so amazing. And I think everything that we'll touch on today will definitely speak to some of those challenges. This question specifically, I feel like in the description for this webinar, we talked about kind of the love and logic approach to copywriting. So I think that it's a valid thing. I do see a lot of feature listing in copy. And I think that we have to consider that pet parents today and going into 2026, and this is only going to become more true, they are making decisions with both their hearts and their heads. So is listing features going to speak to both of those things? Not likely. We see a lot of the humanization of pets, and pets are like family, and that's again becoming more and more true. So a lot of spenders need to be able to justify why they're spending money on a product for their pet versus just any other cheaper option out there. Um, so you as a business owner or a brand builder, you know your product or your service inside and out, right? You're an expert on it. You know the specs, you know the materials that go into making your product, you know all the basic features, right? But when you sit down to write copy, that's not all you want to convey. That's not all that you want to come out. So, you need to be able to kind of analyze those features and in a way that shows the reader why they matter and is going to speak to some of those emotional drivers. You want it to make them feel something, right? You want them to walk away, like we kind of saw in the chat, feeling understood, feeling heard, feeling like, yes, that is what I'm struggling with in my day to day. So they are reading your copy for it, how is this actually going to help my pet? Um, your competitors can't copy you in how you address emotional connection, right? So that is what's going to help you stand out and how you articulate why those features matter to someone in their real life. And when you tap into that feeling behind the purchase decision, it's going to take you a lot farther than just listing out those features. So there's a shift that kind of needs to happen here, and you need to start leading with connection and then kind of connect that back to the feature in your products and not the other way around. We want to start with the emotion. So for example, this is an example I used in a previous presentation. It was for a memory foam bed, right? So most brands who maybe have this version of a memory foam bed, they might say like, let's tell people about the memory foam. But really, it should be more about the pet parent and what they're experiencing. So maybe they are watching their senior dog struggle in the day to day. And now we want to connect that to how the memory foam solves that problem for that pet parent. And you want to actually talk about the relief that they're going to feel once they, attain that goal through using your product or your service. So it's really about kind of connecting the feature is more your proof of the emotional hook. And how do you connect the two dots there? Does that answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, you brought up a whole bunch of other stuff for me too. Like I think a lot of the time few of the thoughts that I have initially are like, yeah, we do get too caught up on features rather than benefits, right?
Mhm.
And I also think about how difficult it is to like really understand our customers and be able to speak directly to them in terms of what they're looking for or their pain points, and at least speaking from a bit of a personal experience, I think maybe we understand what's important, what we think is important to our customers, but we sometimes don't get that entirely right, or we only get part of it right?
Yeah, I think a great place for you to go to if you are kind of fearing that that's the case for you, like you think you understand, but maybe you don't fully understand. A great thing to do is go review mining. So like really like set some time aside to sit down and go through your raving fans and what they have to say and actually analyze kind of the language that they are using around the problems that you're solving for them. Because I think that can be really eye-opening in discovering new ways that maybe you're making your customers' lives easier, aside from what you initially thought when you created your product or your service. Um, and another thing that I teach, and I'll give like a quick overview of this, is kind of a method called the Why Should I Care method. And that is about sitting down. And again, this is time consuming. And I think that that is another big pain point for any pet business owner is that writing marketing copy that is really going to resonate takes a lot of time. But this exercise is worth it. And I think it can help you kind of mainstream your thought process here. But if you sit down and you start with your features, but you're going to name the feature, and we're going to kind of work backwards here to get to that emotional hook so that you can use the emotional hook in your copy. You're going to list out the feature and you're going to simply ask yourself, why should they care? Why should the customer care about this? And what you're going to find is that your answers at first are going to be pretty surface level. And I challenge you to kind of go deeper. And when you think you've like answered the question, take it another layer deeper and deeper and do this until you simply can't anymore. And I think where you're going to end up is somewhere that's much more emotionally resonating um, than just saying, like, here's the feature or here's the first answer to this question. And another example I've used before is like a GPS tracking collar, right? If you're writing an ad for this. So, like, you're going to start with the feature, it tracks your pet's location. Why should they care? Because then they can find them if they get lost. That's like the basic answer. Of course, it's like relevant and it makes sense. But why does that matter? Because when you get down to it, losing your pet is like the pet parent's absolute worst nightmare. Go deeper. Why is that a nightmare for them? Because imagine the feeling of lying awake at night knowing your pet is out in the world and they're scared and they alone and they want to come home and you're hoping they're safe. Like that's a terrible feeling. Um, it truly keeps them up at night. Every time they want to be able to say, every time they leave home, I'm sorry, if I'm leaving the house, I might say to my pet, like, hey, I'll be back, which I do all the time. But you want your pet to be able to relay the same thing back to you, that you can guarantee that if they were to get away from you or get lost, you can guarantee their arrival back home. So that's another if you're fearing that you're not answering like the deepest level of the emotion behind your product, that's another good exercise that you could implement.
Like you said, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
I know that one of the tactics that you employ in your copywriting process is not just like looking for those reviews, but you actually interview customers, right?
I do. Yeah. And I feel like it makes my job so much easier. And it's not to just say like, okay, they're going to write the copy for me, but it like really, I mean, using their words, if if that's your most ideal customer and I'm interviewing them and then I'm like working their exact language into your copy, you can bet that you're going to find other ideal customers just like them who have the same pain points as them and who are maybe explaining those pain points in the same way. And that language is going to resonate with them. So it's definitely important.
Also a time consuming part, but it is worthwhile so that you can get past that base layer, right?
For sure. Yes. Very worthwhile.
So you also kind of switching gears a little bit here. Um, One of the biggest things that we hear about copy is that we don't want to be pigeonholed into just like creating a discount or, devaluing ourselves in order to get somebody's attention.
Right.
So actually, my co-founder loves to say, price is what you pay, but value is what you get.
Yeah.
And that is something that has really stuck with me for a few years now. So I'd love to hear you chat a little bit or explain your perspective on how to communicate value and not rely just on discounting your products or services.
Yeah, definitely. This is definitely going to be relevant in 2026. This is going to be a big challenge because, again, over 70% of pet parents consider their pets to be true members of their family. But affordability is a big factor, a big concern for them. So, how can you justify premium pricing when everyone is kind of watching their wallet? Um, and that, yeah, like Yolanta would say, like price and value are not the same thing. Price is just a number. It's what something costs, but the value is what that means in like the context of someone's actual life, and what that's going to address in their life. So, what am I actually getting for 49.99 or whatever the price is? How does this improve my life? How does this improve my pet's life? Um, and I think something that's going to come into play is like, is it worth maybe sacrificing something else that I would love to have? Or like, like, is this the thing I should be spending my money on? Um, when you only talk about price, you are kind of training your audience to come to you for, the lowest price, for the lowest number. When you're saying that the only thing that matters is how much you can put this on sale, is how cheap you can make this for them. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about price at all. Obviously, it's relevant, and I think we would sound out of touch, quite frankly, if we didn't. But when you talk about value, it's a different conversation. So, you want to talk about the transformation. You want to talk about the actual outcomes and what kind of the before and after, what life is going to look like after someone invests in what you have to offer them. So in our customers' heads right now, like they are standing in aisles or scrolling websites and they are looking at, they're getting fed a lot of information. A lot of premium products, but also that's coming up right next to two or three cheaper alternatives, which is also kind of catching their eye because they do have this like push and pull of value and cost effectiveness. Um, so they have this voice kind of saying, my dog is my family. I want the best for them. They deserve this. But then, well, this one costs twice as much as this other option. And is this irresponsible of me to spend money on? And would the cheaper one be fine or just as good? And how can I justify this? So your copy and your messaging really needs to address both of those things for them. Um, and like I said, if you're only addressing the emotional side, the yes, your pet deserves this side, you're going to sound tone deaf to the financial concerns behind their spending process. So, but on the other hand, if you only address kind of the practical side, you're not giving them that emotional permission that they might need to spend their money with you. So a lot of mistakes I see are like people writing copy as if everyone has an unlimited budget. Like I said, that's like kind of out of touch, premium ingredients and luxury comfort. But they're, your customer might be thinking, should I be spending on this? How can I afford this? Um, if you're competing only on price, it's a race to the bottom, the cheapest on the market. Your product is on sale every single month, and every single month it's the, best sale of the year. That's gonna exhaust your audience a little bit. And again, like I said, you're training them to expect that from you. Um, if you're listing features without connecting to those outcomes, they don't understand why those features matter. And they don't understand what their dog's life could look like because of those features. So when you value communication can do all of those things kind of simultaneously. You want to acknowledge their investment in your messaging. So you're not pretending that your product or your service doesn't cost money, but you're honest that it is a financial decision. And that honesty with your audience is ultimately going to build trust with them. Um, your messaging is also going to help you reframe what they're buying. So an example, like you're not buying 30 servings of supplements, right? You're buying years of more adventurous hikes together, or you're watching your senior dog be able to get up on the couch without wincing anymore, or something like that. So It's definitely a reframe. And then you also want to make sure you're providing like rational justification. So you want them to have the logical permission that they need to justify the purchase for themselves. So again, this might look like in a way to talk about price that like frames it the way that they might need to take the next step. You could say something like, you know, yes, this might cost you $2 a day, but it's going to last you 3 times longer than the alternative. Or this is going to prevent one vet visit. So this ultimately pays for itself 10 times over. So that's how you can kind of combine the two to not be um, naive that price is a concern, but also kind of speak to those emotional considerations. And that is what's going to build trust with your audience, is being transparent in that way.
That is kind of profound. And I was actually just writing that in the chat, right? Like it costs more, but the quality means it lasts longer, right? Or it costs more, but it pays for itself in the security and confidence you have with the product.
Yeah.
I want to kind of make a note and just express like how difficult this is, not just for you guys, our audience, but on our customers, right? They are so inundated with some of the things that you mentioned, right? They see one product and right next to it, they see that same product or something that looks exactly the same. And it's promising the same exact thing, but it's, half as much. It is so difficult for customers and consumers these days to understand what to trust, like where the recommended product is, what actually works. And it's extremely difficult from a copy standpoint to get that message across. And then it's also super important that what you're saying in your copy is kind of identical to what's happening in the in-person experience, whether that's in your store, in your daycare, or at a trade show, whatever it is that's happening when people actually come into contact with your brand, you know?
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah, it's just super, super challenging environment for kind of both parties these days.
Yeah, and I think if you can convey it well, and eventually convert your most ideal customer, I think we also are seeing a lot of brand loyalty. So like that's ultimately the goal, is like, yeah, maybe you won't land every customer who this product would be ideal for, but the people that you do land are going to come back again and again, and they're also going to become your biggest fans and help you ultimately, market your product or your service. And again, that goes back to that review mining and like now what do they have to say about it? And kind of doing that process all over again, and making sure that your marketing is going to bring you more of those people.
The other thing that I would note is that sometimes it's not just the product that creates the brand loyalty. It is the experience with the brand itself, whether that is the communication or the customer service or the speed and convenience, what happens on the website or what happens on social media, like all of that is part of the experience that I think that they are, looking at when you're talking about building brand loyalty.
Yeah, definitely. It all definitely works hand in hand.
So let's talk a little bit about like some of those other platforms, right? How do you diversify copy based on different platforms, whether that's different social media platforms or advertisements or billboards or websites, kind of however brands might advertise their product or service?
Yeah. I think that this is a common, mistake that I can kind of see is like a brand might write a product description or a caption, and then you kind of see it copy and pasted everywhere. And it's not going to convert on every platform in the same way. So I think it's really important that your brand voice is consistent, but I also think that your delivery of your brand voice or your messaging needs to adapt based on the context of the platform. So if you think about like common touch points that your customers are going to come across, your product pages, your email campaigns, your social media captions, even like you said, Matt, your customer service responses, like everything. Each one of those serves a different purpose and is going to require different messaging or a different approach in your messaging. So not a different brand voice at all. It should all sound consistent, but a different approach. So like a product page, for example, is where that love and logic approach is going to be really critical. Like you want to lead with that emotional hook in the headline and you want them to read further about your product. Maybe you want to tell a relatable story, kind of paint the picture of them and their dog for them. And then you do want to get into those practical features or specs and talk about the benefits behind them. So people are on your product page to make a decision. So you need to kind of give them the feelings and the facts in that case. Um, Email is another example. That's like a really more kind of intimate channel. Like people invited you into their inbox. That's a big deal. It's where you can kind of really dig into getting a little bit wordier, in my opinion, and telling longer stories. Yes, you're going to have like your promotional emails and your sales that you're running, and that's not going to require a whole lot of copy. But this is where you can tell a lot of the behind the scenes story, share some customer transformations with your audience, be more conversational with them, try and start conversations with them, get them to reply to you. You're going to give them like, having coffee with a friend energy in their inbox versus any other platform. So maybe not as salesy when you're kind of storytelling, but that again is going to be a big trust builder. Then you have like social media. So I think especially Instagram and TikTok, this is where like, maybe Gen Z, it might be discovering you, or people are just kind of scrolling and you have maybe like 3 seconds to capture their attention, if that. I feel like it's getting shorter and shorter anymore. So that's where you like in your messaging want to really lead with that hook, that relatable problem, that emotional like before and after payoff, a quick, snappy like point of view, and like give it to them so that you're going to stop the scroll. That's going to be your main goal there, is to stop the scroll, and then hopefully you have them hooked enough to explain further into the caption, or to present a call to action that's going to explain further and get them into your pipeline. There are just so many different platforms, like even on Amazon, this is where you're like converting. Like this is conversion territory, right? Like people come to Amazon, they are presented immediately with, 50 other options on that first page. So this is where your bullet points need to be like quick to the point. They are scanning, they are going to the next product, and they, and comparing before they're adding something to cart, ultimately, is what they're doing there. So whatever platform you are landing on, you just kind of need to have like the same heart in your brand voice, but with a different approach, and consider who your audience is, and also consider like where they are in the process. Are they just discovering your brand and you want to find a way for them to, you want them to follow you on Instagram and you want them to continue to interact? Or are they on Amazon and they're finding your brand and they might add to cart and they might buy? So where are they in that process? And that's going to kind of drive how you speak to them in that moment.
What's another, I mean, big part of copy is understanding how people discover you and being able to meet them where they are, just because like you said, the copy that you use in an email is probably going to be extremely different from the copy that you use on a landing page where people are maybe just hearing about you for the first time, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely.
Yeah, so switching gears a little bit, jumping in here, we talked a lot about price sensitivity and emotional drivers, but what about, skepticism, right? We are in a world today where they're inundated, as you said, with a lot of information that may be conflicting, and maybe, pushing one message over another, right? So how does transparency come into play there for today's skeptical pet parent?
Yeah, I think what comes with this kind of information overload is that people become more skeptical. They don't want to be like tricked into something. I think that as like wellness also comes to the forefront, and technology and things being modernized, people want to know like what is your product about? What's in the bag? What, like, where did it come from? Why does it cost what it cost? They might actually care more about the ingredients of it. They are reading your reviews, and I don't know, they can just like smell something being phony from a mile away because they are presented with like such a range of transparency, or honest brands. So I think that being transparent alone can be really boring in your messaging. It's like listing ingredients. Like that's not exactly what I mean by transparency. Um, I think that you need to kind of make it a part of your value story that you're telling your customers. Um, and again, that goes back to mixing love with logic here, and especially in the pet industry. The love part being the emotional connection to the pet, and the logic being the transparency that you're offering that justifies the pet parent's investment. Um, so I'm trying to think of an example, like how to be transparent without being boring. So for example, if you have something and it's made with grass-fed beef, um, you could say that made with grass-fed beef, and you're like, cool, I'm being transparent. But you can even get more specific with it. And I think that's where you are going to stand out from your competitors. You could say, like, grass-fed beef is the first ingredient because we believe that your pet deserves real ingredients and not mystery meat, right? Like just like take it one step further, and that's going to look different for everyone, and what depending on what your brand voice is. Like it might be very kind of scientific, educational, like based on what your, product or service is. It might be funny. It like however that looks for your brand. It's kind of going beyond the basics. Um, you're giving them a transparent fact, but you're also kind of like tying it back into that emotional benefit of really like humanizing it for them and what it looks like for their pet. Um, I think that we'll probably talk more about like Gen Z coming into the scene too, and like their rise in pet ownership. And again, like they were raised in an era of information overload. Like we all experience it, but they're like living it from forever. Um, and I think that as a result, people are just going to increasingly want brands to show their work and be honest with them. Um, it's not just a Gen Z thing anymore. I think that it's spanning across generations. Everyone's becoming a little bit more skeptical. Everyone is doing more research. And we all just like want to feel confident in our purchases and like that we're not, being tricked into something that's not of value. Um, and I think that it's not about like just like data dumping on people, like and being like, I gave them all the facts up front. It's really finding a way to tie that emotional connection into it and then building trust with, honest communication. And also admitting our limitations. Like I think that's important too. Like if you are not the fit for them, like I'm always saying like your copy should attract as much as it compels. Um, I think like saying like, oh, but we're a small batch company and like if we sell out, it's going to be a 2-week wait for, our next batch, or we're not the cheapest on the market, but here's how we don't compromise our quality. And actually I just saw an ad earlier and I screenshotted it, and it was for a bone company, and the headline of the ad said, "We are not the cheapest bone on the market." But then the whole rest of the ad went into explaining why. And it was just so well done. And I was like, that stopped the scroll. Like I stopped to read. And it was definitely compelling and upfront. Like, no, we're not the cheapest option, but this is why you should consider us anyway.
I think an overall theme that we're hearing here is that in your brand messaging, you have to play a delicate balance, right? Between what your message is about, but also when you're, curating and tailoring your messaging for your customers. You mentioned Gen Z, right? We have the rise of, modern pet parents, but then we also have, your existing customers that you've, been attracting or working with for years. How do we avoid alienating them? How do we balance this out?
Yeah. I think, yeah, like it's not about speaking Gen Z slang or anything like that. I think with their pet ownership surging and their spending becoming more significant, yes, they do communicate differently than previous generations, but I do think a lot of that is again comes back to like that platform and just kind of analyzing what platform you're speaking to your customer on. So I think that ultimately, again, like I'm still trying to figure out what 6'7" means. My kids can't tell me. I wouldn't incorporate that into my copy unless I was just making a joke about like how out of touch I am, right? Like I wouldn't try and use it in a way that makes sense because I don't know how to use it in a way that makes sense. Um, I think in the pet industry, those core emotional drivers haven't ultimately changed. They are still there. It's still like love for their pet, the fear of making the wrong choices for what their pet needs, having pride in being a good pet parent, maybe feeling a little guilty about like, am I doing enough for my pet and their needs? Those emotional drivers are going to be pretty universal across generations. So I think more what has changed is the expectation about how your brand communicates. So modern pet parents, Gen Z, but also increasingly more older generations too, do expect authenticity over perfection in your messaging and in everything that you do. Not talking to them in like marketing speak, I think is a big one. And again, the acknowledgement of like their real life problems. So I don't think that you need to like scratch your entire brand voice because Gen Z is on the rise or anything. I do think try and see where like your customers could use like a shift in your language, whether that's like we are seeing more multi-pet households, we're seeing men on the rise as pet owners. So maybe look at your customer base and say like, am I accounting for them or am I only speaking to dog moms in my marketing? And again, that's like some just like a minor tweak that you can make to start to be more inclusive in your language, if that's the case for your brand and how your brand voice can evolve. Um, I think that you can be more conversational and not corporate, and that's going to go back to like that um, building trust that this is going to appeal across generations. Again, people like are getting hit with so much information. No one has any time to read like marketing speak that they don't understand anymore. They just want to like feel like they're being talked to by a real person a lot of the time. And you can, it's an art to like weave in, like if you have a really professional, um, expertise kind of brand voice, that can be a hard thing to like come to a middle point on. But it can be done. And I think that that's a way that your brand voice could evolve to make sure that you're not just kind of using jargon to speak to your customers because that's not going to be relatable for them. Um, I think also again, just saying like platform smart, like Gen Z might find you on TikTok and like, what are you doing differently there than you're doing on Facebook? Who is your audience on Facebook versus TikTok? A big thing for Gen Z specifically, I feel like, is they want to interact with the brands that they buy from, whether that's on social media. Or wherever. So like an example is a brand just came to me and they are new to TikTok Shop. So we had to kind of analyze who they're going to be reaching on that platform and what we can do there in a way that still stays true to their brand voice. And what we came up with was like a very interactive kind of TikTok Shop experience. And it really kind of encouraged anyone who lands on that product description to not only buy the product, but then to kind of create their own content around the concept of how we presented it. And like they have this opportunity to like be shared by the brand, which again is like really trust building. And like if a brand is sharing content, and of course then you get, free user generated content, which is great. But I just feel like it's so much more of a personal connection if you give someone an opportunity to showcase the product or to showcase your service and to also like share their own pet on the internet and like they think their pet is the best and they want everyone else to agree, right? Like and now their pet is in the spotlight. So I think that really is going to work really, really well on TikTok, but probably wouldn't perform as well on Facebook. So I think that you just really need to be smart about how you're accessing these platforms.
That's awesome. And there's a question that came into the chat that I think is really important to address because some people who may have come into this session, actually, we're talking a lot about copy and may not grasp what that really means. So just in case, we want to nip that in the bud right away. Cait.
Yeah. Copy is, yeah, any form of written word that goes into your marketing funnel. So everything from every social media caption to your emails to the words on your website, literally anything written to represent your brand and your marketing.
Awesome. So before we open up the floor for Q&A, I would love to share with everybody how they can potentially learn more how to work with Cait. So Cait, where can today's attendees go if they want to take the next step for 2020?
Yeah, definitely. You can scan this QR code if you're interested in a quick 20-minute messaging strategy call. I would love to answer any questions that you have about your messaging for 2026. My website is caitmellorwrites.com, or you can email me at kate@caitmellorwrites.com. I'm also pretty active on Instagram if you want to check me out there at Cait Mellor Writes. Yeah, those are probably the best places to find me.
Fantastic. And for everyone who would like to stay tuned to stay up to date on what's coming next, sessions like these inside the Pet Industry Network. So make sure to grab this link, petindustryNetwork.com/waitlist, because we're going to be announcing pretty soon the Q1 schedule of education that we're going to be delivering. So make sure to go ahead, get on that waitlist, because if you found today's session valuable, we are committed to continuing to provide that support and continue doing this month after month to make sure that you're getting access to information and resources, and you're empowered and with toolkits and implementation partners and really clear steps to help you move forward, just like the one that Cait just mentioned. If definitely book that session with her, because I don't know about you, Cait dropped so many gems in the last less like 45 minutes or so. I hope everyone has been taking a lot of notes. So you can imagine what you can just learn from that call alone. So it's very worthwhile. I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to questions, but so please throw them inside the chat, and you can take this off screen, Matt. Just want to thank Cait so much for giving her time today. November is very, very busy for everyone here in this room, right? We're in the middle of Q4 holiday season. So I also want to shout out everyone who's here who made the time to come here, elevate their learning, figure out what do they need to do to really stay competitive in 2026, so that not only can your business survive, but how does it stand out, right? So that you can continue to deliver and serve your local communities and all of your customers. So we actually have some really nice thank yous coming in through the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and pull out some questions. Let's see. So we have a question from Medina. Thoughts about having a YouTube channel and Pinterest as a platform to reach double income, right? No kids. Was that double income, no kids? What else is with a dog,
With a dog.
right? Multiple dogs, I think, because of the S.
Travel. Okay, sorry, I was rereading the questions. Also, Pinterest as a platform. Yeah, I mean, I think these are great ways, and I think they can be repurposed, which is a big thing to consider too. Like I'm pretty sure you can repurpose YouTube content to Pinterest directly. So I feel like the two could work really nicely hand in hand together. And as well as blog posts, which a lot of clients I've worked with are repurposing blog posts that they write to Pinterest as well for reach.
Fantastic. And then we have another question from PDX Professionals. How would you go about understanding a specific pet parent audience that you don't have much experience or much in common with outside of being a pet parent? I think this is a juicy question.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely competitor analysis, like who are your biggest competitors and who are their audience members, and kind of getting to know them the best that you can. Kind of review mining there. Not to copy anything, but just to understand some of the pain points of the customer directly. This is where Facebook groups are really great as well. So if there are communities of the people that you're trying to reach, getting into those Facebook groups and just kind of you can ask questions, of course, and like interact with those people. But I think a lot of the pain points that you're going to be looking for are going to naturally occur there, because that's what Facebook groups are for, right? Like, so I think immersing yourself in as many communities where these audience, these pet parents you're trying to understand better are hanging out, is really just going to be the best way. Like anywhere that they are naturally coming to people with questions, for how to better their pets' lives is where you want to be.
Definitely. And while we wait for more questions to come through, I'm going to pull up a comment that was shared earlier. And it was from Adina. Thoughts about, hold on, actually, yes. Adina mentioned when we asked the question regarding, having to put your brand messaging across multiple platforms. She commented, you can ask Chat GPT to do it for you. And I think that we should address that, right? Because when it comes to copywriting and brand messaging, yes, AI is making it faster than ever before to, generate some text. Where's the fine line with that, though, right? Especially in that case that you presented regarding multi-platform brand messaging. So let's touch on that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. This question or this topic comes up for me a lot, obviously, as a copywriter. I think it's so important to understand, like, I am not going to tell you not to use AI. That's just crazy. It would be completely naive of me to tell anyone to do that. I think it's a great assistant, but I do think that we need to make sure we're having such a keen editing eye, and that we're not just like regurgitating the same thing over and over, which is what I'm starting to see. And I think that I am a little bit more sensitive to being able to sniff out like someone or a brand who might be using AI to create the same kind of template caption all the time. Um, I don't really know. It's actually like research I would love to do more. Like, is it just me because I'm a copywriter, or is it that other people are going to start to notice this? I do think other people are going to start to notice it, especially when every brand starts to have a watered down message and sound the same. So, yes, use ChatGPT or AI to make your process more efficient, but do not remove your brand voice, your personality from it. Is this something I would actually say? Kind of like, just like brain dump how you would describe something before you're even asking ChatGPT about it. And it's actually probably going to make it easier to use ChatGPT to come up with copy, right? Or it's going to make things more specific. So actually a big pain point that I'm seeing on the rise, which is interesting, is that pet brands are coming to me and saying like, Cait, like I gotta say, we're a chat GPT company and it's just not working. Especially because if you do have a team or someone else who's working on your marketing, it's kind of too many cooks in the kitchen using that AI, right? It's not just one person necessarily. And then everyone's doing it differently and everyone is editing it differently. And then it doesn't sound the same across platforms. So you need someone to drive the ship. Absolutely. And you do want to regularly kind of audit yourself for, is this sounding robotic? Is this, drifting away from my brand voice? Because I do think that if we're using it in the day to day, we can become a little bit reliant on it. And our quality control, I might need some retraining to make sure that, we are making sure our messaging is different than everyone else's.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and so did Adina because she followed up saying that she puts her copy in and then ChatGPT basically puts in the best format for the platform that she wants to use it for. So
Yeah.
yeah, workflow efficiency makes sense here, but you still, the business owner, the one who's driving the messaging in the business, you need to keep control of that wheel is basically what we're taking away from this.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, definitely. So a flood of more questions just came in, which is fantastic. We still have 6 minutes left, everybody. So we're going to try to get through as many as possible. So this is your last chance to drop them inside the chat, okay? So in terms of, let's see, Manda asks, can you give us an idea as to which platforms are better for obtaining new customers versus customer retention? So curious, based on your experience, what you've seen work the best.
I think TikTok is on the rise for definitely obtaining new customers. I've seen that a lot. I've been dipping my toe into writing copy for TikTok, which is exciting and new for me. But I do think that a lot of brands are using it to obtain new customers because the reach is better there. The same like reel or video that they're posting on TikTok is getting like so many more views than when they post it on Instagram. I think the algorithm is a little bit different. I'm not an expert on algorithms, but this is just my experience and what I'm like writing for. So I do think that it seems to me at least that Instagram is more being used more for customer retention for at least my clients, and like TikTok I would say Instagram and Facebook. And then TikTok as like obtaining those new leads. Also, you want to make sure your SEO is on point, which Matt could speak to, I'm sure, but to obtain new customers that are searching for something that whether you're a local business or a brand, that they are landing in the right place when they search you on Google. And then also, I think more on the rise too is how like social media content is coming up in Google searches. So it all really works hand in hand, but that's in my experience what I've been seeing lately.
Absolutely. And we have time for just a couple more. So let's see. Stephen asks, I'm offering something that changes the way we have dealt with a huge issue. I'm assuming in the pet industry. How do I change minds, right? So I think this is more so a question about how do you take a difficult subject, right? Or challenging, what is the approach for a subject that may meet some friction and resistance from, the traditional way of doing things?
I think education is going to be your best friend. I think that your content should be very education focused in trying to change someone's mind away from something like the way that they've always done something. Again, you need to like not only say this is the new way of doing things, but this is why, and this is why it's a better way to do it. And again, try and speak to those emotional considerations behind that. So why is it better? Why is it better for the pet? Maybe it's easier for the pet parent to do it this way. And without knowing exactly what it is, that's like my broad answer for that one. But yeah, education in your content. I mean, educate until you just feel like it's overkill is my answer.
That's great. Okay, we have last one inside the chat. So Anne asks, and she lists out all these platforms. I'll do my best. YouTube, Facebook versus Insta versus TikTok versus Pinterest versus X, formerly known as Twitter, versus podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you focus and what's the flow and order of operations? And I think you can speak to this one very well from having worked with you in this kind of capacity.
Yeah, honestly, I think that it's going to vary, depending on your business for sure, and where you have success on these platforms. Again, who specifically your audience is, where they're hanging out. Are they watching YouTube videos? Are they on Facebook and Instagram, or are they scrolling TikTok? So I would say you can't do all of these all at once and implement them perfectly. So I would analyze who it is you're trying to reach, which of these platforms they're most likely to be on, and I would start there as far as your order of operations. Um, I also think you need to be building your email list no matter what on any of these platforms because those are going to be like your hottest leads, your warmest leads, people who want to continue to interact with your brand and might even give you some further insight into your audience. So pick one or two where you think your ideal or where you've done the research and know that your ideal customer is hanging out and try and do those pretty well and see what your ROI is before you shift gears into something else. Don't hop around, see what works and what doesn't work. And if you can always go back in 6 months and say, okay, why am I even on Facebook? My audience isn't hanging out there. I'm not getting any leads from there. Let me switch gears and try Pinterest or whatever that might be.
Absolutely. It's important to notice what's working and when is the right time to pivot, right? If something isn't working, then, adjust your strategy. This has been absolutely incredible and amazing. I just want to throw up this slide one more time. Scan the QR code or grab this link right here in the chat. If you haven't already, grab your free session with Cait because like Cait mentioned, when she has a little bit more context about your business, she can give you even more tailored insight on your questions. So grab that link right now. And again, I just want to thank you so much, Cait, for joining us today. I want to see some snaps, some emojis, some claps and applause inside the chat or in the gallery screen. If you guys can throw in some nice words or thanks for Cait, that would be fantastic because she's here giving up her busy time in the middle of Q4 to help, bring access to information that is just going to propel you in 2026, right? To help you unleash basically what's possible in your business. So thanks again, Cait, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, the fact that you guys are here and thinking about 2026 when I know we're all just like tired at the end of the year speaks volumes to your dedication. So I really am honored that you joined me today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. And thank you to everyone for joining us live today. We are going to send out the replay with all the important links as well. So keep an eye out for that tomorrow. Alrighty, then, we're going to close out our last session of Inside the Pet Industry for 2025. Thank you all for joining us.
Hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you next year, 2026.